Today, I'm going to show you how to turn these soil blocks and any pack of seeds into healthy seedlings and thriving plants. This is the soil blocker. The design is pretty simple, which makes it an incredible piece of agri-technology. It's got 4 chambers for packing in soil and 4 dibblers for making little indents for the seeds. Basically, every one of these you can find is made of stainless steel and is built to outlast you. I've made thousands of blocks with this thing over the past 5 years, and it's still going strong. The mix for soil blocks is pretty important. If I had to guess, this is why most people fail at their first soil block attempts. You need a mix that won't dry out too quickly, but has enough drainage so that it doesn't get waterlogged. It also needs enough nutrition from compost or other sources to get our plants through their infancy. I use my soil sifter to make sure that no large particles get in the way of my developing seedlings. For my blocks, I use 3, sometimes 4 ingredients. For most of the mix, I use an inert growing medium, like peat moss or coco coir. Both will work for soil blocks, but they're both slightly different, and the ramifications of using either one are a little beyond the scope of this video. So just choose one and go with it. Today I'm using peat moss. The second ingredient is well-aged compost. You don't want to use anything partially broken down, because that's a great way to introduce fungi and bacteria into the block that may cause the seeds to rot before they germinate. For this batch of soil blocks, I mixed in some homemade organic fertilizer. But because we know how to make high quality compost, this won't make much of a difference. The next ingredient is perlite. Perlite is a volcanic glass that's formed by hydrating and expanding obsidian in very high temperatures. It's kind of like popcorn made of rocks. This agricultural agent is porous, which both helps with water retention and drainage in these soil blocks. Because it's so porous, just like biochar, it can hold on to lots of water and create a safe little home for loads of microbes. The 4th ingredient I sometimes use is old soil blocks. They've got everything you need, and you don't want to waste them if the seeds fail to grow. These failed blocks can be crushed up and thrown into your next batch. I like to pre-mix and store the soil from my blocks. It's a great way to stay organized. And it's a good way to make sure you have just enough soil for the blocks that you want. Once you've got the dry mix right, you've got to add water. Then mix. Then add more water. What works best for me is when I go slightly beyond the field capacity. That means that when I take a handful of the mix and squeeze it, I should get more than a few drops coming out. I try to go for a steady stream, like you see here. Making the blocks is pretty simple. You jam as much soil as you can into the blocker, compressing it to fill all the gaps and make a solid block. Then you push the blocks out by pulling back on this bar with your fingertips while pushing with your palm. It takes a little practice to get efficient with it, but it's not too hard to make consistent soil blocks. The next steps are seeding and covering your seeds. Sometimes I'll use the same mix that I use to make the soil blocks, which works pretty well. But whenever I can, I try to use vermiculite because it's much better for water retention. And then I water them in well. Let's take some time to talk about the water. You can either top water these blocks with a gentle hose attachment or bottom water them. If you want to put large groups of blocks together and keep them in one place until they're ready to plant, you should be top watering. When top watering, you want to use a hose head with a very fine mister to prevent your blocks from falling apart. Because soil blocks have so much surface area that's exposed to the air, they can dry out pretty quickly unless they're packed together very tightly. So if you keep your soil blocks outside like I do, you probably have to water them every day. If you're trying to avoid plastic, you don't have to use trays, but for the home gardener, this is a really convenient way to keep soil blocks. If they're kept in a tray, it makes them easy to move around for bottom watering, and the edges of the tray prevent them from drying out as quickly. Trays also make it easier to move large groups of soil blocks and keep yourself organized. It's going to take at least a few weeks for your plants to be ready. If you're starting your soil blocks and keeping them outside like me, you're going to want to build a protected place for them so that they don't get pummeled by rain. I made this little hardware cloth shelf a few months ago, and I just put some landscape fabric over it to protect it from the rain, the sun, and the wind. You can definitely get more fancy with this, or you can use one of the greenhouses they sell on Amazon. This has always worked fine for me. When you see roots popping out of the block like this, they're ready to plant. One of the biggest benefits of using soil blocks is the process of root pruning, where roots that meet the gaps between the soil blocks die due to the presence of oxygen. Although this sounds bad, it's actually great for your plants. The best thing about soil blocks is that once you put them in the ground, they grow ridiculously fast. Even without proper root pruning, if you make them right, soil blocks really set your plants up for a good start. But I do have one advantage over most gardeners. My security cats are constantly roaming the rows, so I have a lot less pest pressure than most people have to deal with. I recommend getting your own. There are a few more things I look out for to know when each block is ready to plant. I wait for at least 2 sets of true leaves, and for the roots to grow out of just about every visible part of the block. Normally, this takes about a month, but it varies based on the specific plant, your watering schedule, and the climate. There's a bit of a large learning curve once you upgrade from using trays to leaving your soil blocks out in the open. And to be honest, you shouldn't even be attempting this unless you have a shelving unit that allows for free drainage on all sides of the block. When you're bottom watering, it's really easy to tell when your soil blocks are fully saturated with water. But when you're top watering, you might miss hydrating the very center of your block. So you should always put a little bit more water than you think you really need. As long as your mix is well draining, you can't really overwater them if you're keeping them outside. But different rules apply if you're inside or in a really humid location, so use your best judgment. If you guys have any trouble, leave a comment and I'll try to help you out. Although I sometimes reuse my old blocks to make my mixes, I try to catch them right when the seeds are germinating so I can reseed them. I don't use fancy tools for this. I just make a small hole where the seed should be, and then pop another one in. If you've got good seed and you do a good job of keeping your blocks hydrated, your germination rate should be pretty good. This entire set didn't need to be reseeded, and they only took about 2 weeks to be ready to be planted in the field. Keeping your soil blocks together will also change the way that your roots grow. There'll be a whole lot less air pruning, and the roots may grow directly into the next set of blocks. This isn't much of a problem, because when we separate these for planting, we'll be doing some manual root pruning. When you're planting, you can either match the depth of the soil block right to the ground level, or you can plant them a little deeper, up to the point of the plant's first true leaves. Burying them a bit deeper works great for brassicas like cabbage and kale, and it also works really well for members of the nightshade family, like tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants. So even if it seems a little deep, tuck your plants in really well. Next time, I'm going to be showing you how I set up the irrigation on the farm.